Hey Wargamers, it's time for another list review. This is something that I do for my supporters over on Patreon, where I take lists that they send me, I review them, point out things that I think work well, things that I think work not as well, and then revise it while trying to maintain the core concept of the list. So in this case, we're looking at a crisis-heavy Farsight list, and so I'm going to revise it in a way that basically maintains that same motif, that same general style of play, but makes tweaks here and there to hopefully make it flow a little bit better. So that's what we're doing today. Right, so like I said, we are starting off with a crisis heavy list. It is a 3 detachment list with 2 battalions and 1 auxiliary support detachment. We will start off with one of the battalions first. That way, when we get to the support detachment, it makes a little bit more sense. So both battalions are Farsight Enclaves. The first one includes a Cadre Fireblade and a Cold Star Battlesuit. The Fireblade is stock, of course, and then the Cold Star has 4 fusion blasters, and he's trading 2 of those in for fusion blades, and then taking 2 shield drones alongside him. Now, there are good things and bad things about this. I really like the fusion blaster Cold Star loadout, obviously, for lots of reasons. It gives you high damage output, high mobility. The fusion blade component of it also works fairly well because he might be in a situation where he needs to charge, especially in a Farsight list. A lot of units are going to be up close and personal, and so having the fusion blades on a Cold Star can work out really well. I think it pairs a little bit better when you take the Farsight command trait, or not command trait, warlord trait, that allows him to heroic intervention at a further distance. I think it works out a little bit better that way, keeping him safe from shooting and everything, but overall still it's at least a very fun loadout and can work in certain situations. So I like that. The 2 shield drones, they're a good way to get more shield drones in the list, especially when he starts out. He's going to start out on the board. He needs those shield drones there to basically help him and other units out. But they're not essential because he's going to outrun those shield drones really quickly. The alternative is that he deep strikes in with those shield drones, but then you're losing some of the advantage of taking a Cold Star in the first place. And I think it tries to go in 2 different directions. There's another issue with this list when it comes to deep striking. So right now we're at 114 power level, and there are far more than half of those power levels, so more than 57 power level, that could potentially deep strike here. So we have to be very selective in what we would be deep striking, meaning that most things in this list are going to be starting on the board. So okay, moving on to troops. We have 2 units of Kroot. These are going to be screening units. That's good, that's nice, that helps out. Protect you a little bit, but is not completely necessary. I think really I would prefer these to be strike teams instead of Kroot, but either way is fine. I don't think they're going to be pulling a ton of weight regardless, and having a few more bodies with the Kroot can help you with some board control and objective capturing. Then moving on to the 3rd troop unit is a strike team. It has a Shazwi with the marker light, and then let's see, and then and then 4 more fire warriors. So this is good. This is another nice source of marker lights. I like embedding marker lights within strike teams just because it gives them a little bit more resistance to taking fire. So if you have just a unit of Pathfinders, an enemy can easily take out all your marker lights in that Pathfinder unit. But if you have your marker lights hidden inside strike teams, then it's a little bit harder for them to actually do that. For one thing, fire warriors are more durable than Pathfinders, but they're also you select which guys you pull off the board first, right? And your Shazwi is going to be the last guy you pull off the board, so it takes them longer to get rid of your marker lights. Moving on to elites, we have a unit of Crisis Bodyguards. The reason for these Crisis Bodyguards is somewhat apparent already, but it's going to be more apparent in a minute. These guys are going to be soaking wounds for commanders. We have 1 bodyguard with 3 fusion blasters, 1 with 2 cyclic ion blasters and a drone controller, 1 with 3 cyclic ion blasters and another with 3 cyclic ion blasters. And so I like the general loadout here. Oh yeah, and then of course there's 5 gun drones and 3 shield drones. The loadout here with the drones is a little complicated. I'm not a huge fan of giving up a spot for a drone controller, but if we look at what we're actually getting for that, we have 5 gun drones, and that's actually a fair amount that can benefit from that drone controller. And because they're going to be up close and personal, that can actually translate into a lot of wounds. So I think it's a fair choice here to do that. The 3 fusion blaster is kind of a weird add-on to this unit. I mean, I like having fusion blasters, but I think in general, if I was going to be taking a unit with mostly cyclic ion blasters, I would just do that throughout. The alternative is to spread your fusion blasters out. So basically have 2 cyclic ion blasters and 1 fusion blaster on each suit. And I like this approach because it basically means that you're taking a more generalist approach. If you are taking all your fusion blasters on 1 suit, it means that you have the ability to specialize your unit after the game starts. So if you have to put wounds on somebody and you're facing a horde army, you don't really need the fusion blaster. So you're going to put the wound on the fusion blaster guy first and lose him first. So that way you maintain all your specialized weapons towards the enemy that you're fighting. But it also means that if you're fighting a more generalized army, you are going to be out something sooner rather than later. So I like to spread my fusion blasters around. I like to spread my weapon options around if I'm doing something like this, because it allows me to maintain that component of the list longer. Whereas if I'm taking fusion blasters, if something happens to that 1 fusion blaster suit, then I'm out of fusion blasters. So yeah, there's that. Moving on to fast attack, we have 2 units of shield drones. That's good. Shield drones are going to be very useful. You're going to be dropping those in to support your crisis suits. And again, that's adding to the power level component. As a reminder, you have to leave more than half of your army in terms of power level in or on the table. So you can't have more than half of your army deep strike. So all these little things add up, especially with the big chunky crisis suit units. They're 29 power level. So that's taking out a lot of our deep striking ability here. The 2nd battalion is another Farsight battalion. It has emergency dispensation in order to take the pure tight engram neurochip on our first HQ, which is the Fireblade. He has 2 shield drones, which again are a nice way to get more shield drones in the list, but not necessarily going to be placed in the best position depending on how you deploy. If you're putting your Fireblade down in the middle of fire warriors, he's not necessarily really going to do that much. He's not really going to need those shield drones, or you'd be better off at taking gun drones or something else in that position. So the shield drones aren't necessarily going to pull that much weight here. The 2nd HQ in this detachment is Farsight himself. So he's going to complement the overall theme nicely. He's, in all honesty, I probably would, want to take another Cold Star here, but this is part of the theme of the list, so this is something that I'll maintain. Farsight and the crisis suits are kind of the core idea. So, and they're super fun to play with. So, cool. We'll stick with that. Troops, we have 2 units of breachers. Again, one has the Shazwi specified here. The other one should also have that specified, but we know what we're going for. So here's a breacher team, another breacher team, and this one has a marker light on the Shazwi. I like the marker lights on strike teams. On breacher teams, I think I'd rather just have the standard Shazwi, because I'm probably never going to fire that marker light from the breacher Shazwi, because he's always going to be moving. He's going to be getting into combat potentially. Like, there's all sorts of things that make a marker light a lot more clunky than we would want on a breacher team. And so, yeah, it doesn't work out as well. Additionally, breacher teams are weakest because of their lack of numbers, so you really want to get as many breacher shots as possible. they do the best when you have lots of shots, and having fewer shots, that just you end up suffering from the law of averages, I guess. So then the third unit here is the strike team, just how it was before, and that's dandy. I like that. Elites, we have another unit of crisis bodyguards. This time the drone controller is on a fusion blaster suit. We have another fusion blaster suit with 3, another cyclic ion blaster suit with 3, another cyclic ion blaster suit with 3, and this time only 7 drones. 5 of them are gun drones and 2 of them are shield drones. Again, if the idea here is that we're going to be starting some of the units on the board, I would prefer to have more shield drones and fewer gun drones. But if we're deep striking in, then having more gun drones can make sense. So, you got to kind of weigh the tactical options here. And in this case, I think I'd prefer for one of these 2 crisis bodyguard suits to have more shield drones than gun drones, because we're not going to be able to deep strike both of them. Then we have a Pathfinder unit with 5 Pathfinders, and then a second Pathfinder unit with a Recon Drone, a Pulse Accelerator Drone, and 5 more Pathfinders. This unit is kind of interesting because the Pulse Accelerator Drone is not actually that useful. It's useful for gun drones and for fire warriors that are starting on the board, which of course all fire warriors are unless they're in a transport, and then the gun drones are unless they're deep striking. But really, I think it doesn't actually contribute that much. It's not going to be pulling that much weight because again, you're only having a few drones. This guy's going to be hard to position to actually benefit the units that you want to benefit. So I think it's going to be hard to actually implement the accelerator drone. I like the idea. I just think it might be a little clunky. The Recon Drone here is nice. It's basically, this list doesn't include any stealth teams. So the Recon Drone is here to serve as a low altitude deployment provider. So basically, crisis suits can deep strike on top of the Recon Drone using a stratagem, and that's certainly one option. It does force you to deploy your crisis suits where your breachers are, or where your Recon Drone is, and that's sometimes good and that's sometimes bad depending on who you're playing against, right? Like, there are certain cases where you want your breachers to be on the completely other side of the board than where you want your crisis suits, and so this does force you to kind of take a death ball approach, and that can work out sometimes and it can not work out other times. So it does build in some restrictions into how you can play the list. It's not super flexible. So ideally, I would like to see a homing beacon in here just to give you a little bit more flexibility. But even without that, you do have the option to deep strike here, which is nice. And then of course the Devilfish to carry those breachers and the Recon Drone, and then one of those fire blades presumably, and then maybe also this auxiliary detachment, which is an ethereal. It's a Sakia ethereal, which has through Unity devastation, and then a hover drone, and he's also the warlord. So this is a really interesting component of the list. Basically, the Farsight can't take ethereal, so if you want an ethereal, you have to take it as a separate detachment. And here, the only way to make that happen with the other 2 detachments as they are is to take it in this auxiliary detachment, which means that we're giving up a CP to do it. But it's a Sakia ethereal, meaning that he has leadership 10 instead of leadership 9. And then he also is going to be allowing units within 6 inches to use that leadership and can buff their morale tests with his invocation of the elements. So he is here to basically alleviate a couple of the issues that we have with leadership throughout the army, primarily with drone units. But I think I think he's more trouble than he's worth. He's 50 points. He gives up a CP, and I don't think it's going to be as easy as we think to use him in a way that he's going to be in the right place at the right time. I think it's, that bubble's only 6 inches, so he's going to be it's going to be hard for him to benefit the units that he needs to benefit. So I think he's more trouble than he's worth, honestly, here. I do like the idea. I think it's a really clever way to work an ethereal in, but I do think it's probably more trouble than it's worth. It's going to be hard to implement. I could be wrong. You know, there's certainly ways to do it, but it would take a lot of careful planning. Okay, so that's the list. It's 2,000 points. Let's look at the revision. All right, here's the revised list. I've basically just narrowed it down to the 2 battalion detachments. I've dropped that ethereal because, again, I think he's more trouble than he's worth. If you wanted to use an ethereal along with a bunch of foot slogging crisis suits, I think a viewer law list would work out better than a Farsight list. But again, we're maintaining the theme here, sticking with Farsight. So yeah, if you want to go that route, I think I would have preferred to go with viewer law. It would work better with the Cold Star too, and all sorts of stuff. It just would give up the ability to take Farsight himself as well as the fusion blades. But yeah, so okay, on to what this list actually is. So we have 2 battalions. The 1st battalion, again, that Fireblade and the Cold Star. These guys are basically exactly the same as they were before. We have the Cold Star maintaining those shield drones in order to kind of help them out early game and help out other units early game, importantly. For troops, we have maintained those crew squads as well as the Fire Warrior squad. And in elites, we just have some minor tweaking here. So instead of having 2 basically equal units of crisis suits, I have one that has a little bit more going on. This is going to be our deep striking unit. The other unit is going to be not deep striking. The other unit is going to be starting on the tabletop. And so we have this one larger unit that is deep striking, and because they're deep striking, they're going to be up close and personal right away. So I'm taking weapons that benefit from that. One of the benefits of cyclic ion blasters is that you can be far away. You can be 18 inches away and still use them to full effect. Fusion blasters and flamers, you gotta be closer, and you are benefited for being closer, of course, because you're Farsight. So I think flamers work out really well in this context. Flamers with the Farsight +1 to wound is really nice, and then the fusion blasters, similarly, they don't really need the benefit there, but you're going to be up close and personal, so you might as well be rolling your double damage. Or your 2d6 take the highest for the damage. So I have a Crisis Bodyguard with Flamer and 2 Fusion Blasters, another one with Flamer and 2 Fusion Blasters. I have the Drone Caddy with 2 Flamers, and then another Flamer, 2 Fusion Blaster, and then another Flamer and 2 Fusion Blaster. And then also, because this unit is deep striking, I've maintained the heavy gun drone component and the 3 shield drones. We also have 2 units of tactical drones. I've bumped the 1 tactical drone unit up to 6. I wouldn't want to go much higher than this because of morale reasons, but we have 6 gun drones here. They can potentially deep strike in behind this Crisis Bodyguard unit, assuming they're more than 9 inches away from the enemy. Moving on to the 2nd Battalion, I have a Fireblade, another Fireblade with 2 shield drones, and then the Pure Tide Engram Neurochip, and then Farsight. So basically just added the Fireblade here. For troops, we've maintained those 2 Breacher teams here, having the Shazwi be explicit in the listing. And the strike team is again the same. I've added a unit of stealth teams, including a homing beacon. So this is going to again give us a little bit more flexibility in terms of where we're deep striking. We're not going to be forced to have the Recon Drone there and spend a CP in order to do our deep striking. So this gives us a lot more flexibility, and it gives us the added benefit of having infiltrators on the board early on. So that's going to give us more board control, which we really want as Farsight. We're wanting to be aggressive, and we don't want to be restricted in our movement by enemy deployment. So having stealth suits out early basically allows you to dictate how the opponent deploys and therefore how you're going to attack them. So I think the stealth team are a valuable component of this list. We also then have that second unit of crisis suits. They are 3 strong, each with 3 cyclic ion blasters, and then I give them 4 shield drones because, again, they're going to be starting on the board. We want them to have the protection from the shield drones. And these guys are going to be deploying aggressively because you have 18 inches, but that's not necessarily going to be enough to reach the targets you want to early on in the game. Keep in mind, because if we're deep striking this other crisis suit unit, that's most of our firepower in that other unit. So we really need some firepower on the board, putting some pressure on turn 1, and that's what this crisis unit is going to be doing, along with the breachers. Then we have a unit of Pathfinders. Again, they kept the Recon Drone because it gives us that a little bit more flexibility, but also has some nice benefits for ignoring cover on the Devilfish, which we've maintained. So that's a list, 2,000 points exactly. Really not massive changes. I wasn't quite sure how I would change this list because I think for the concept it's doing what it's supposed to do fairly well. There's just some minor tweaks that I made in terms of reallocating crisis suits and stuff like that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you like the original list better? Do you like this list better? What would you do differently? Have you used something like this? All that good stuff. Love to hear it. Thanks for watching, and of course, happy wargaming.
Hey everyone, this video was made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you also enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there. Special thanks to Max Harrison, NoExcusesPanda, Paul Lueders, TauOswell, Nick Steele, Jared Egeler, Brian Mann, Jake Johnson, Eric Jackson, Cristofer Sarale, Youhei Penguin, Andy M. Young, Peter Benjamin Parker, and Giovanni DiMaggio.